What encouraged you?
I was encouraged just by the reminder of Jesus' love. Especially like just in this setting, like sometimes we're just so intellectual about it. Not that love can't be intellectual, but just a good reminder of that like intimacy component.
Yeah. Good. We'll go around this way. I agree.
Okay. Yeah, just you brought up I think the truth that everybody does desire significance and security, and that we find that in
to remember that. Like, I can think of experiences as you're explaining that, people showing genuine love to me, and just encourage that. That's not what everybody has.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful.
Dave, yeah, I was encouraged by your illustration with your friend taking the time, and then just thinking of that as a picture of Jesus' personal care. Yeah.
Me too. I'll pick up right there. That's what encouraged, among other things, what encouraged me a lot. Just how you communicated Christ's love for not just in the story, but in the way you told it, and just the genuineness of your presentation. I was very helped.
I was encouraged by thinking through how staying connected to Christ does provide security for myself and purpose in my life.
All right, so what could you have done better, or what were you working on you felt like you didn't quite?
I mean, honestly, like, this was a really hard sermon for me, so like, it took me a long time to figure out the passage, get to an argument, figure out how to go about it with non-believers. So I didn't feel like I knew like my manuscript as much as I wanted. And I feel like there was definitely like one or two times where I was kind of searching for words, so I didn't feel like those parts were as clear as they needed to be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
I'm sorry, Kevin, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'll say the encouragement thing. I was encouraged by your talk of significance by being a rescued one that rescues, and thinking that actually offers a significance in life that nothing else can touch.
Mm-hmm.
For something like improvement, I wasn't sure what to make of the command to love in the text.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like you were just saying that this is like what it looks like here in the church, but there was this whole thing like, you're my friend if you do this. So the text seemed a little bit stiffer than what you were doing, and I just wonder if that might leave a reader like, wait a minute, like, what's going on with this command to love versus being loved?
Yeah, Dave, I liked your introduction, but I think maybe it might have been too long.
Yeah.
You were 8 minutes until you got to the reading of the text, and so just maybe a little too lengthy on that.
Yeah, and kind of following from your introduction there, I don't know if your main point worked. Not that it wasn't connected to what you were talking about, but like you didn't touch it again, I don't think, later on. And I think maybe going off the significance and security that you very well illustrated at the beginning, you could have probably reworked your main point to be more on point with what you said throughout, which was really, really good.
So, there's a lot of moving parts. And like significant security, your main point with his deepest desires, following Jesus, lifelong connection for lifelong production, and then there's 2 connections, 2 productions. It was just a lot, and it was hard to keep track of it all. So either simplifying your parts, or I think it'd be best to just try to simplify it a little bit, because it was hard to keep track as we're going on.
One portion I was a little bit caught on, Dave, with respect to the gospel connection. You mentioned that Jesus put our interests above our own, and then I think you fleshed that out a little bit. But I guess I was just wondering, stepping back, is that, like, the way it came to me is he died for us, for our to give us significance and security. That might not be the way you intended to present it, but so I was just on a theological point, just wondering, like, that doesn't make sense to me, like Jesus dying for me to feel better, is how it comes across to me.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I thought your first half of your sermon was actually pretty clean. I think your second half, I started to get a little bit lost. And I kind of felt like you felt like you were getting a little bit tired of that second half.
I have some D3 gummies for you, so you can keep it.
I don't. What are D3 gummies?
Vitamin D.
Oh.
Keep your energy up.
Pops up
piggybacking on what the last few people have said, I think the sermon would be help. You had a lot of great material. It's just some kind of way to simplify and sort of clarify how these moving parts move together. So particularly in the first half, I understood what you were trying to do is you made these, these 2 things, here's my main point, there's 2 things with 2 outcomes. That was an attempt to clarify, but it never did pay off. I never could quite catch it. Then on the back end, looking back on it, I'm like, oh, okay. I got it, but it was like, man, there's probably a better way to set it up so that we could understand it coming in. Even though you made an effort to do so, it just didn't work as well as it could have.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because the material wasn't good, it's just how it was sort of set up.
I guess the other thing I wasn't sure that there was just a lot of tension built up in here as to like, other than, and this is where I think like Victor was on, like the significance and security was a place where you built tension. And so at the moments where you paid off on that, it was like, all right, there we go. But the rest, I just wasn't sure, like, why do I want a life-producing kind of thing? You didn't emphasize, like, that if we were apart from Jesus, like, we wouldn't have life. And so, like, I just didn't feel a lot of tension from that argument. Like, stuff was there that you could have done it, but it was just like, especially I was thinking if I was a non-Christian sitting there, I wouldn't have felt this to be like super compelling. Like, oh yeah, I really need this. Like you didn't argue to having a life-giving connection. The closest thing you argue to what we need is significance and security. So maybe that's where like this connection to Jesus gives you significance and security. I mean, I don't know what you're gonna do, but that was what you made. This is your need, and that's kind of what you paid off on, rather than creating a need on the other way.
Right.
So that might have created the energy in the second half or all this stuff, but.
Yeah, and then on your presentation, the first half, it was like I thought you were kind of like firing on all cylinders. Like your eye contact was excellent, like the tone was excellent. Then all of a sudden you could just see this, like all of a sudden, like this slowing down in the pace, and you kind of almost took on a little bit more of a somber tone.
That's where I was not nearly as comfortable and confident with my material.
Yeah, I was kind of been, kind of what Andre was saying, because your cadence also kind of changed at points, where you had like these like dry kind of cuts to the way you were talking. And that was a little distracting, but I felt that you came off a little bit like maybe insecure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Just throwing it out there because I don't have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, maybe even as we do these sermon maps, it felt pretty explanation heavy, without a lot of varying
Yeah.
ways of explaining. I mean, you had some which were good, and I'll point that out later, but I think for the most part it was very similar in the way you were going about it.
I have one that's a repeat sort of, but just use of voice, adding variety somehow for our sake to know which part is kind of maybe what you want us to really take away or something, some kind of variation. Oh.
When I was like looking at this passage, like one of the questions that I was like thinking about, and in your sermon I was thinking about like I really want to abide in Jesus, but I don't know like how to abide in Jesus. I think you mentioned like the church, but I would have appreciated a little bit more applications as like how am I supposed to like stay in Jesus?
All of mine have been said already, so what did you do well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I did was setting up that need, even if I didn't pay off continually as much as I should have.
I thought you had a couple of things where you called back to, like, that brought some coherency. Like here you're gonna like experience like people will love you and not just the Instagram you, which was like a callback to the influencers thing that you had said earlier. Talking about like again the significance of like being a rescuer on the Titanic. It's like you had a minute there where you slowed down, where like, you know, it's not just getting in the boat and going away, they're going to get more, and then like the dent the universe versus denting eternity. It's like there was a few minutes there where you just kind of settled in, and it brought some coherency to what you were doing and kind of just allowed my brain to like kind of catch up to where you were. So that was a moment of real clarity and driving home some of your point there.
Yeah, I loved your illustrations. The one with the fridge and like
Yeah.
how
Oh,
that
yeah.
need, and then everybody's experienced that. And then
Yeah, the fridge was great.
and then the rescue party one, that was excellent. Like we're saved, but then immediately we're part of the rescuers now on the mission team. Like those work great.
Yeah, man. I don't know if you heard, like during the break, I was saying like I was feeling that afternoon kind of slump. I was actually a little worried I might start like kind of dozing off, but it was really engaging, and I was glad about that because, know, I was just enjoying it. I wish I didn't like have to like take notes so I could just enjoy what you were saying because it was well delivered and engaging.
Yeah, back to the encouragement. I thought the piece on genuine love and showing what the church is was one way that you could show why this is something that unbelievers would want. And I think you were showing that, and you made the concession like, hey, it's not a perfect love, but it's a genuine love. And just moving into that bit, I thought was the right thing to do and helpful to understand what you're talking about there. So,
They've had some good, simple definitions sprinkled throughout. I thought your definition of sin was really helpful. Break of relationship, kind of even tied to this passage with relational emphasis. I thought that was strong.
So I appreciated your transitions. One of them, you had a concession in there. You said at this point you might be thinking da 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 da, and then you went to the next point that answered the refutation, and then after you did the illustration with your friend's love for me, then you went right into, well, what is that? You went right into the next piece by asking the question, what does it look like? And it was one who lays down his life for a friend. So it's like, oh man, I wouldn't even have thought of using that right there as a transition. I mean, using that illustration to transition right into talk about a friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really masterfully done, really helpful.
I thought like the binary you set up was like what abiding in Christ is meant to produce in us. It was actually pretty helpful for me. Like what is significance and what is security and how does that flesh out in a life of Christ's love for you and your purpose in bringing other people onto the rescue boat.
I really liked not just what illustrations you used, but like how you were using them for the context you were in. Yeah. So like the fridge thing and the Titanic thing and the friend thing are all really good just in and of themselves, but they're also something that like any non-Christian is also going to get, especially like the fridge thing. That was like genius. So yeah, I'm stealing that one. Like, because now you're arguing with them like in their kind of terms, right? You're not saying the Bible says like you have this need, and then like you said, you know, this Christian counselor or psychologist or something says like we have these needs. I kind of thought like, well, maybe you could just drop the Christian thing and just say that there's a counselor or an author says something like this. But I think even when you have the Christian thing on the front, everybody resonates with the idea of significance and security. And so all of a sudden, those are like kind of the basic human desires for an evangelistic kind of talk. That's where like you want to get. So it was not just like what you used, it was with whom you were using it and how. It's good.
Oh, one more?
Andre's like it finished, but that's what was good about it.
Conclusion was the best part.
Andre, I can't believe you'd say those things.
You brought up the being conformed to the image of Christ, and I thought maybe like, oh, that might be kind of like, people are like, what does that mean? But then you went on to explain it, and you just started by way back in the garden, and kind of gave a simplified explanation. I thought was good.
Yeah, I was worried about when you went back to the garden and all that. Kind of going off what Andre was saying, you used that, you left it there for a second, but then you were explaining how following Jesus, which is what you were calling us to do, is actually making us human, like in what God designed us to be. I thought you explained that well, and you used it well in leaving it there, but then after explaining the necessary bit, you came back to show us why this is something we actually need and long for, whether we realize it or not. You're speaking on that level to us.
you had this line, you said, love we show others and being shown, or something along those lines, is what points back to the love Jesus has shown us. So you were talking about the church there, and I think you could have used it a little bit more, but in the idea, it's just like, if you ever were shown like a genuine love, like that love is always pointing to a greater love that Jesus shows. And I thought that was just a helpful way to think about it, especially for unbelievers, like, oh yeah, I know what a genuine love is, but I don't know where it comes from, or I don't know why it matters. So then it's like you just show that in there.
Dave, I loved your piece on the church, talking about, you conceded it's not all, I don't know exactly how you said it, but lilies and roses, whatnot. But then you presented church relationships in a really compelling way that inspired me, oh man, I gotta love people in the church. This is a good thing. And I like the example with your friend. That's great.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what was said before. I was engaged the whole way through. I think this is the first time I heard you preach, so I can't compare it with anything. But bottom line is, there was no, for me as well as attention, there was no dead spot. So it was like with you the whole way, and I agree with Victor. I mean, I wish I didn't have to take notes, because I was like, man, I'm being fed pretty good right here. So I really appreciate it. I said all that to say though I cannot comment on your progress, I really appreciate today the affect and the way that what you were communicating was matching what was saying, and all those types of things.
I know you've been this is something that you've been working on, and I think there's a lot of progress, and I do think you work the room very well and look around, and even though there was a spot in your sermon that you're a little bit unclear about, I didn't feel like when you hit that point you just kind of were glued down. You were still trying your best to aim it at us, so I think you're making a lot of strides in that area. Preaching.
Thank you guys.
That's that.
Yeah,